All right, so I last left off with this picture. You're probably going, "What's going on here?" So I was telling you that Akhenaten was obsessed with his religious reforms at the expense of all other things in his kingdom. Again, was he trying to break the power of the priests and create an independence where, in the court, did the pharaohs really not have the power that they outwardly seem to have, and that he was having a power play within the elite system? Or was he really genuinely believing this and kind of crazily obsessed with his new religion at the expense of all other things? Again, we'll never know. But what appears to have happened is also a radical break with traditional art forms. And the way he depicts himself is a kind of a bizarre, well, something to take note. So some archaeologists and historians believe that he actually had a kind of genetic disease, or there's a name for it, where the features become elongated. There's a documentary I watched in the past where it shows people who suffer from the same kind of this kind of thing, where they have really long, elongated faces and extra long fingers, and their bodies just kind of have this unique look. And I don't actually even know, maybe suffer is the wrong word. They have a look that makes them stand out as very different. Um, and so that's the wonder. But then also the question is, was this just artistic license? Since he's already being radical, was this just simply a way to depict himself that was creative? I mean, so I have this picture to the right here just to kind of illustrate. When you see this artist, obviously, women, let's say this is the artist's girlfriend. Well, it's not that she looked like that, but perhaps making the hands as large as the artist is making and so forth was artistic license. That's all I'm trying to say. So I just kind of wanted to throw you into that kind of nerd fight that happens over in Egyptology land about what to make of Akhenaten's condition or not. Anyways, so you see here, I mean, and so you look at this way he depicts himself with his family in this really almost like feminine form he has. But it's interesting, right? Because you have the sun disk here, and you notice the sun has like little hands that kind of bring life. And here's the Ankh, symbol of fertility, of life, and family life in a way. So these are very intimate pictures. And something quite different and unique to Egyptian history. Okay, here is his daughter, his wife. As we see how she's depicted, is very beautiful, and by modern standards, in most cultures, she would be considered quite elegant and graceful, very classy looking woman, a very great, picturesque first lady, if you will, right? Now, let's talk about a little bit about his Amarna letters, of correspondent tablets that were found. They were found in Upper Egypt at Amarna, and a place, the modern name for Egyptian capital of Akhenaten. Okay, because he switched his capital, and the archive had a correspondent of clay tablets that was mostly diplomatic, and it was between administration of Egypt and its representatives in Canaan. And with the Amorites. It's unusual because most of it was written in Akkadian cuneiform. So this kind of shows you, I mean, look at the links here. We're going in from Mesopotamia to Egypt, and then this ancient Semitic language then being used for correspondence. It spans a period of almost 30 years. It shed much light on Egyptian relations with Babylonia, Assyria, some other groups we may not have discussed or heard of, Syria and Canaan, and then Cyprus. So that's very significant and interesting about an aspect from the time of his rule. Here's what gets really interesting, and this is more controversial and debatable in scholarly circles, and so I just want to really point that out. For many, there is this idea that he actually influenced Israelite religion. And if we're going to say Israelite religion, what we're saying is the Jewish Christian Islamic God concept being rooted back to him. Now, again, that's a controversial statement, but it's an interesting one in that, I mean, so for example, he focuses worship on one God. Again, I told you not a strict monotheism, but an idea of Aten. And Aten is the sun, and more obscure, not this kind of animal god or human god that would be normally depicted in Mesopotamian or even traditional Egyptian religion. Having a sun disk with rays, and the way he talked about him, it's easy to take that abstraction and to make it further into an abstract idea of an invisible, overpowering, non-pictorial god, right? The hymn to Aten, it's found, has a very similar feel to what, for instance, Psalms 104 says. And so I'll let you just read that on your own if you can see that in my lectures there. But I mean, it's interesting to see the comparison. Now, is there a direct link or not? Again, many scholars don't think so anymore, but they did before, and there's still this kind of curiosity. So, C.S. Lewis, who's converted to Christianity, and many Christians definitely know and celebrate the legacy of C.S. Lewis, he pointed out that he saw similarities between Psalms 104 and the hymn to Aten. And if I remember right, reading his commentaries on it, he didn't see that as a threat, but he saw that maybe that God was revealing himself, I think, kind of in different ways, and that he didn't feel threatened by seeing that as a similar thing, while some might actually find that to be a threat to their faith. That wasn't the case with him. Sigmund Freud, interestingly, the guy who pioneered psychoanalysis, wrote a very interesting book that I'd recommend reading but not buying into necessarily all the way, linking Akhenaten's religion to Moses and the ancient Israelites. And he was Jewish himself. He wrote this book called Moses and Monotheism, written in 1937. With the rise of the Nazis taking place, it's one of the last works that he wrote, I believe. And what he felt is that Moses was an Egyptian who pretended to be Jewish. He makes up a story. So you know how we have the similarities we talked about in Mesopotamian religion of the child being brought in with a reed basket and being raised like I think that was Sargon, right? And how similar that is to the Moses story. Well, what he believes is that there was Egyptian aristocrat who followed the Akhenaten religion of Aten, who then fled with a cult of followers. And actually, this reminds me I need to back up and kind of say something. What ends up happening to Akhenaten is that when he dies, the Egyptian priests with a vengeance take over, and they try to eradicate the legacy of Akhenaten. It was possible we could have never known about him. And they restored the old Egyptian religion, and he was definitely hated for good reasons by them, because he was trying to shut them down. So that's what ends up happening with him. So then Sigmund Freud says, well, that as the Akhenaten religion of Aten gets squashed, that this Moses, an Egyptian elite, takes away a bunch of Jews, telling them that he's actually one of them, making up the story that he's Jewish when he's actually Egyptian, and then having them follow him, believing in this god, Aton. In Hebrew, the singular form of Lord is Adon. And then he tries to linguistically say, well, Aten and Adon sound very similar, and that that he then is taking these people over into Canaan and morphing the religion of Akhenatenism into a new type of monotheism. It was a very scholarly and interesting approach. Most scholars don't agree to it, but I believe even the Rosicrucians, if I might be wrong, and there's an Rosicrucian Egyptian museum in San Jose, California. I think that their order believes in something similar to that. So I guess what I'm just kind of pointing out is that there's been a lot of people who believe that the influence of monotheism on the Jewish people was linked to the Akhenaten period. And I'm also saying that it is controversial and not believed by a lot of even scholars who are not religious, who don't aren't. This is not like a attack on their faith. They just don't see the links, despite how tempting it is to kind of easily put it into that box. Okay. Um, Akhenaten has been popular in popular culture, such as Philip Glass. He has like a kind of weird avant-garde musical play. I'm not going to play it now, but he made over that. So, um, essentially, I just wanted to show you that aspect of ancient Egyptian culture. Oops, so I accidentally hit pause. I'm not sure where I cut off, but um, essentially, that's where I wanted to end there. And now I'm going to go into a little bit more of Egyptian religion now.